Okay, so let's add some subsurface scattering to our character's skin here. And before we get into the materials themselves, I like to add a nice bright backlight behind our character so we can see how the light will pass through the thinner areas of our model, like the ears here, which will make setting up our subsurface effects a bit easier. So back to the redshift menu, and we'll bring in another area light, which doesn't show up over here because we still have these three layers soloed. So let's just switch off all the soloing for now, which brings back everything in our scene. And we'll do the inverse of that by hiding everything we don't want to see instead of soloing what we do want to see. So we'll hide the hair, the flowers, and the jewelry. And we're left with everything else, including the area lights we just added. So let's rename this to SSS light. And we want to position this behind our character here. So we'll do the same trick that we did before by going to Camera, Use Camera, and Selected Object as Camera. And if we frame up on our character, we can now orbit around to reposition this light from its perspective. And it might help if we start the render view again. And that light's a bit to the side at the moment. So let's just move around behind her a bit more until we get this nice rim light happening back here, which should allow us to see any light penetrating the ear when we set up the subsurface effect. So let's do that. We'll switch back to the node editor and start on the face material. And if we take a look over here, we're currently plugged into a plain old redshift material, which does have some subsurface scattering properties over here. But for skin, we've actually got a better option. And that's the redshift skin material, which is specifically designed for this kind of thing. So let's bring one of those in and we'll make a bit of space. And you can see this is using a very standard sort of setup for skin, where we've got shallow, mid, and deep color inputs for the subsurface effect. So let's connect this up to the output first, which if we take a look up here under Tools, I've set that to the shortcut key D. So if we hit D on the keyboard, the selected node connects straight up with the output. And we should see that update over here. And we might just do a render region on the face only because subsurface scattering can be a little bit slow to render. And at first, it's looking a little bit strange because we're currently allowing that light to penetrate a bit far into our character. And you can see the radius scale is actually set to 100 centimeters, which is huge. So let's drop this down to something more realistic, like maybe 1 centimeter, meaning the light can only penetrate the skin up to a depth of 1 centimeter, which definitely looks a bit more realistic. Next, we'll change the mode from ray traced to point-based because that tends to calculate much faster, although it is a little bit less accurate, but I think we'll be able to get away with that. And to be honest, that gets us most of the way there already, and we can even start to see a bit of that blood red coming through inside the ear. And the default settings in the skin material are almost perfect right off the bat, so all we really need to do at this point is pipe our diffuse texture map into the mix here. So we're not losing the texture detail as we are here because we're currently using solid colors in here instead. So let's come over here and grab our diffuse texture and just move it up here. And we want to pipe this into the shallow color here because that's kind of the outer layer of skin. And then we'll take that same diffuse texture and tint it this color for the mid scatter. And then we'll tint it red for the deep scatter. So let's make a bit more space here. And one way we can tint our diffuse map is with a color bias node. So I'll bring one of those in as well. And we'll need 2 of these. So holding Control, we'll drag out a copy. And we'll rename this top one to mid. And this one will be our deep scatter color. And if we pipe just our diffuse texture map into the output, we can see what that looks like. And it's got some nice skin details in there. And if we then pipe it into the mid color bias node, it goes a bit darker at first, but we want to tint it this color back in the skin material. So I'll copy that and back in here, we'll paste that into the bias. And now the diffuse texture has been tinted that color. So that's the mid layer sorted. Let's do the same for the deep scatter. So we'll connect that to the output and we'll go back here and copy the red color and paste it into the bias here. which now tints it red. So back in the skin material, we can now connect these up. So we'll link this back to the output and replace our 3 scattered depths. So we'll pipe the diffuse texture directly into the shallow color. Then the mid color bias needs to go into the mid color, and the red tinted version goes into the deep color. And we've now got the extra detail back from the diffuse map, but it's all looking a bit overly red at the moment. So let's make a few adjustments here. Firstly, the shallow weight needs to be a bit more dominant than that. So let's bring that value up to 1, which decreases some of that red. But I think we might need to drop that red layer down a bit as well. And back that mid color off as well until we have a nice mix of the different depths. And we've lost that red in the ear now, so we might need to increase the deep scatter radius as well. And if we bring this up to the extreme, we should probably switch over to bucket rendering so we can get a more accurate look at this. And you can see we've got that red subsurface effect back in her ear, but it's obviously way too intense and also spilling out into the face as well. So let's bring this back down a bit. And I think I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. So that's the subsurface effect all set up. We just need to pipe the rest of our maps into our new skin material. So the bump blender needs to go into the bump input, and the reflection map can go into the reflection color. And we'll also put that into the secondary reflection color as well. And if we grab our skin material again and take a look under reflections, we can increase the reflectivity with these sliders here if we need to. So let's try bringing up the weights on both of these and maybe a bit more. And now her skin is looking a bit more wet or oily, which I think could work. So all we need to do now is take this same setup and apply it to the other skin materials. So let's quickly do that. Let's grab these 3 nodes and copy them, and just grab the torso diffuse texture. And we can probably pause this for now so it doesn't slow things down. And we'll paste those nodes into here. And pipe that into the shallow color and into the mid and deep color bias nodes, which are already connected up correctly. Then we'll relink the bump blender and the reflection map like we did before. And finally, we'll connect the skin material to the output to replace the standard redshift material. So I'll just do the same for those remaining skin materials. And with that done, let's switch off the render region and fire off another bucket render. And now we have a much more realistic looking skin, complete with subsurface scattering, which allows the light to penetrate the skin as it would in real life. So we can now switch off our SSS light. And we're ready to move on to the next lesson where we'll sort out our jewelry and clothing.